Welcome to The Unlikely Executive, the podcast for leaders who never expected to end up in charge, but are determined to do it well. I'm Barbra Carlisle, executive coach to founders, CEOs, and purpose-led leaders who want clarity, confidence, and a team that thrives. Each episode, I dive into real conversations with leaders who've navigated pressures and big decisions so that you can lead with courage, honesty, and impact. Let's get into it.
Welcome to The Unlikely Executive. Today, I want to talk about something that costs organizations more than most people realize. And this is the conversations that need to happen but are not happening. I propose to you that there is likely to be a conversation that should be happening in your organization right now that somebody needs to have but that nobody is addressing, potentially because of fear of conflict. So, for example, it could be a team member whose performance has been declining for months. It might be a decision that's made or communicated and then quietly reversed because somebody complained or they worked out it didn't work. It could be a project that everyone knows is in trouble, but nobody has escalated it because they don't want to be the one to say it. People will argue that leaders need courage. I actually argue that if leaders don't have the capability, then having the courage is slightly pointless. Most leaders in the built environment have never been taught to have a difficult conversation. So conversations turn into confrontation, and they've not been told how to hold someone accountable without destroying the relationship, or how to carry authority without becoming authoritarian. Research, for example, has shown that the average employee wastes 7 working days for every crucial conversation they avoid. Multiply that across a management team of 10, and you are losing 70 days of productivity per year to things that people know need addressing, but they will not raise. In the built environment, the cost is more tangible than just lost days. It shows up in rework because issues were not challenged early enough. It shows up in grievances that escalated because a direct conversation 3 months ago would have resolved them. It shows up in good people leaving because they've watched a colleague get away with standards they would never accept for themselves. In my work with leaders across the built environment and the charities that I work with, 3 conversations come up repeatedly as the ones people actively avoid. And the first one is the performance conversation. So someone is not meeting the standard. Everyone knows it, and the leader's just been keeping an eye on it for weeks, sometimes months. The longer it goes unaddressed, the worse it gets, not just for the individual, but for the team who are watching and drawing conclusions about what's acceptable here. The second is the upward conversation. For example, telling a director, a client, or a board member something that they don't want to hear, because escalation is a risk. Pushing back on an unrealistic. The third is the team dynamic conversation. So, for example, 2 team members are not working well together. Friction that started small is now affecting delivery every single day. The leader is managing around it instead of through it because they do not know how to intervene without taking sides. So my question is, why do leaders avoid these conversations? And it's almost always one of 3 things. First off, they have no model. They've never seen it done before. The role managers either avoided these conversations or handled them so badly that the leader associates directness with confrontation, or they fear damaging the relationship. This is particularly common in sectors where you work with the same people for years, sometimes decades. What they do not recognize is that the avoidance is already damaging the relationship. The other person often knows something is wrong and is waiting for that conversation. Or leaders simply lack the skill, being direct without being blunt, giving feedback that develops rather than deflates, holding someone accountable while maintaining their dignity. These are what I would call learnable skills. They're not necessarily intuitive, and most management training either skips them or covers them so briefly that the learning doesn't really stick. So how do we lead with authority? What does that actually look like? For me, authority comes from consistency, saying the same thing privately that you say in public, following through on decisions, and being predictable in your standards so that your team knows exactly where that line is. So it's consistency and clarity, not hedging your message to avoid discomfort, not saying, oh, we probably need to think about maybe having a conversation at some point about your timekeeping. Far too vague and apologetic to create lasting change. So what do you think you could say that is kind, compassionate, and clear with authority? Authority also comes from fairness. It means holding everyone to the same standard, including the people you like, the people who've been there the longest, and actually yourself as well. Selective accountability just breeds resentment faster than almost anything else. Authority also comes from timeliness, addressing things when they happen, not 3 months later. The longer you leave a conversation, the harder it becomes. The more resentment builds on both sides, and the less likely the issue is to be resolved. And authority, really importantly, comes from follow through. So you've had the difficult conversation. The thing is, you need to check in with them. Did the agreed change happen? If it did, acknowledge it. If it didn't, have the conversation again. Be clear, kind, compassionate with authority. A difficult conversation that is never followed up is actually worse than not having one at all, because it teaches the person that you did not mean what you said. I want to just bring in Google's project Aristotle research, which examined over 180 teams and found that the single most important factor in high performance was psychological safety. But beware, psychological safety doesn't mean being soft or avoiding challenge. It means creating an environment where honest, direct conversations are normal. A leader who avoids a difficult conversation is not creating psychological safety. They're actually creating a culture of avoidance, and that leads to mistrust. When leaders find the skill and confidence to be direct, change tends to be visible within weeks. I know it sounds a bit weird, but it's true. Conversations that were being avoided get had, decisions get made and are held, and standards do stop drifting. And the wider effect on the team is counterintuitive. When a leader holds the line consistently, people feel safer. They know what is expected. They know how poor performance will be addressed rather than just tolerated. Holding people to account makes people want to stay, not leave. People do not want to work for a leader who avoids the truth. They want to work for someone who respects them enough to be straight with them and the other team members. What I've been talking about today is explored in Pillar 2 of the Leadership Impact Programme that I run with leaders and their teams. To let you know a little bit about it, I've developed a free online scorecard so that you can see where you stand across 4 leadership pillars. If you want to take the free assessment, please go to www.gleecoaching.co.uk. And I'm Barbra Carlisle, building leaders to build their teams and their futures together. This is The Unlikely Executive. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. And if you've got any queries or questions, just get in touch. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Unlikely Executive. If today's conversation challenged you, encouraged you, or gave you clarity about how you lead, then make sure you follow the show so that you never miss an episode. I'm Barbra Carlisle, helping leaders who never expected to be in charge show up with courage and fairness and conviction. Until next time, lead well, stay honest, and keep doing the work that matters.